The most important bomb ever dropped was almost never dropped at all. It was dropped twice. The first attempt failed. The second attempt failed. And the city that finally died on the 9th of August, 1945, was never supposed to die at all. It was the second choice, the backup, the city on the list that nobody in the air had wanted. Hiroshima had been a decision, deliberate, chosen from a list of targets, argued over, measured, a statement written in uranium. Nagasaki was not a decision. Nagasaki was an accident of weather, of cloud, of a pilot who had already failed his primary mission twice and who had fuel left for exactly one more chance to do the thing he had flown halfway around the world to do. For 70 years, the world has remembered the first bomb. It has a museum, a dome, a permanent place in the moral memory of the human species. Hiroshima is a name that needs no explanation. Nagasaki is the second bomb, the forgotten sequel, the city that was erased not because it was chosen, but because the clouds refused to part over the city that was. This is the story of the most consequential accident in human history, the bomb that was meant for one city and fell on another. And the question that still sits underneath it, unanswered and unasked, what does it mean when the worst thing that ever happened to a city was never even meant to happen there at all? I'm your host. This is Papa Delta Storytelling. 3 days, that is the distance between the two bombs. Not years of strategy, not months of deliberation. 3 days. On the 6th of August, 1945, a single uranium weapon, codenamed Little Boy, detonated over the city of Hiroshima. In a flash measured in fractions of a second, perhaps 70,000 people were gone. The city itself, its bridges, its tram lines, its schools, was no longer a city. It was a wound. The world had never seen anything like it, and the men in Washington believed that seeing it would be enough, that the sight of a city erased by one bomb would force an empire to its knees. It did not. Japan did not surrender. The emperor did not speak. The military hardliners who actually governed the empire looked at the destruction and concluded something almost impossible to believe. They concluded that the United States could not possibly have more than one of these weapons. It was a calculation, a gamble placed on American scarcity. The Japanese High Command reasoned that building a device of that power took years, that no nation could industrialize the atom overnight, that the bomb over Hiroshima must have been the only one, the crown jewel, spent and gone. They were wrong. The Americans had been building 2 bombs all along, and they were wrong in a way that cost a second city everything. 3 days after Hiroshima, the order went out. The second weapon would be dropped. There would be no pause, no negotiation, no moment for the shock to settle. The war would be ended with the atom, or it would not be ended at all. The bomb was called Fat Man, plutonium, an implosion device, more complex, more destructive, and more powerful than the uranium bomb that had flattened Hiroshima. Where Little Boy had been a gun that fired a lump of uranium into itself, Fat Man was a sphere of plutonium squeezed by explosives into criticality, the same physics that had been proven barely a month earlier in the blinding white sand of the Trinity test. The Target Committee had drawn up a list, not to choose a city, but to rank cities. The primary target, the first choice, the city they actually meant to destroy was Kokura, an industrial arsenal city, home to one of Japan's largest munitions factories. Nagasaki was on the list, but it was the second choice, the backup, the city you reach for only when the first city is unreachable. The air crews knew the plan. Their orders were precise: bomb the primary target. Only if Kokura was obscured, only if the weather closed in, only if the first city was impossible, only then did the bomb go to Nagasaki. Every man on that flight assumed it would never come to that. The bomb would fall on Kokura. The mission would be remembered for the right city, and Nagasaki would survive the war as nothing more than a footnote on a target list. That is not what happened. Before we go further, hold on to this number, 3 days. That is all that separated Hiroshima from Nagasaki. Not a war of attrition, not years of strategy. 3 days and the second bomb. Here is what makes that gap so hard to believe. The men who governed Japan looked at what fell on Hiroshima and concluded it could not happen again. They reasoned that no nation could have built more than one such weapon, that the bomb was a crown jewel, spent and gone. They were wrong, and they were wrong in a way that cost a second city everything. It is worth sitting with that because the whole story turns on it. Now, back to the mission, back to the Ace T2. The mission, 6:30-12 Frankheim. The plane was called Boxcar, a B-29 superfortress named for its boxcar-shaped fuselage, flown by a major named Charles Sweeney, the same man who had piloted the observation plane during the Hiroshima strike. Now, he carried the bomb himself. The mission began on the morning of the 9th of August. A formation of B-29s climbed into the sky above the Pacific, carrying the plutonium sphere in its bay, carrying the list, carrying the orders, carrying the weight of a choice that none of the men in the cockpit had made, but all of them would be remembered for. They flew toward Kokura, the primary, the city they were meant to destroy, and the clouds arrived first. Kokura was covered, not by a passing storm, by a blanket, thick, low, unbroken cloud that hid the city completely from the air. The bombardier could not see the aiming point. The mission could not be completed. So they turned. They made a second pass. The bombardier searched again for an opening in the cloud, for a glimpse of the city, for anything that would let the bomb fall where it was supposed to fall. Nothing. Kokura stayed hidden. Sweeney brought the plane around a third time, desperate now because every pass was burning fuel he did not have to spare. There was also the problem of the escort. A second B-29, the instrument plane, had failed to rendezvous. Sweeney had circled, waiting, burning fuel he would need later. By the time the formation reached Kokura, the fuel was already short, and the clouds would not cooperate. 3 passes over Kokura, 3 failures. The primary target was lost. Sweeney had a choice now, and the choice was brutal. He could continue circling Kokura, gambling the fuel on a 4th pass and the chance of the clouds parting. Or he could turn south to the secondary target and drop the most powerful weapon ever built on the city that was never meant to receive it. He turned south to Nagasaki. History does not record the moment Sweeney made that turn as a decision of war. It records it as a footnote, a failure of weather that redirected a historical catastrophe, but it was the most consequential turn any pilot ever made, a course correction that erased a city that had done nothing to be first on any list, that was not even the second choice of its own destruction. As the plane flew south, a third mission was already unfolding in the dark. On that same morning, the 9th of August, the Soviet Union launched its invasion of Manchuria, 1 million men pouring across the border into the Japanese-held mainland. The two events, the bomb and the invasion, are almost never told together. They were simultaneous, they were overwhelming, and between them, they left the empire with no way out, no time to breathe, no room to negotiate the surrender on its own terms. But that reckoning was still hours away. First, the plane had to reach Nagasaki, and the clouds were following. Before we follow Boxcar into the sky, one thing you should understand about this flight: every man on it assumed the bomb would fall on Kokura, the primary target. That was the plan, the orders, the expectation. Nagasaki was the backup, the city you reach for only when the first city is unreachable. They did not know, climbing out that morning, that they were about to become the most consequential accident in history, that the clouds would take their city from them and hand the bomb to another, that the turn they would make over Japan would erase a place that had never been first on any list. Keep that in mind, the assumption and what broke it. Now, the mission. Act 3, The Blast, 12-15 Cho. Nagasaki was a different kind of city. Where Hiroshima had stood on flat delta land, spread wide and exposed, Nagasaki was a city of valleys. It climbed the sides of hills, wrapped itself around a harbor, tucked itself into folds of ground that had protected it by accident of geography for centuries. It was also a Christian city. In all of Japan, no place carried more weight for the faith that had been persecuted for 200 years. The hidden Christians, the Kokura Kirishitan, had kept their belief alive in secret for generations, enduring torture and execution rather than renounce it. Nagasaki was the place their faith had been planted and the place it had survived. Its great cathedral, the Urakami, stood as the largest Christian church in all of Asia. The bomb did not know any of this. As Boxcar approached, the clouds that had hidden Kokura were there again, sliding over Nagasaki. For a moment, it seemed the second city might survive by the same accident that had saved Kokura. The bombardier could not see the aiming point. Sweeney was nearly out of fuel. One more failure and the mission would be over. The bomb would go into the sea and Nagasaki would live. And then, over the Urakami Valley, the clouds parted. A single opening, a window of clear sky over a district of Nagasaki that none of them had meant to find. The bombardier, a man named Kermit Behan, locked the target. At 11:02 in the morning, on the 9th of August, 1945, Fat Man detonated approximately 1,800 feet above the Urakami Valley. The blast was larger than Hiroshima's, 21 kilotons, a sphere of fire a quarter-mile wide, a shockwave moving faster than sound. A city of valleys, hidden from the air, visible now only as a column of smoke rising from the ground where its cathedral had been. Because of the geography, the hills, the valleys, the destruction was not uniform. Hiroshima had been erased flat. Nagasaki was broken in the places where the bomb reached and spared in the places where the hills had stood in the way. The Urakami Valley was annihilated. The cathedral collapsed. The hidden Christians' church, the emblem of their survival, was reduced to rubble in the time it took for the light to reach the ground. Nearly 40,000 people died in the first moments. Tens of thousands more would die in the weeks and months that followed, of burns, of radiation, of injuries the war would never count. And the bomb had missed its target by nearly 2 miles. It had been aimed at the heart of the city's industry. It had detonated over the residential valley of the Urakami, the most Christian district in Japan. The second bomb had failed to hit its city, so it hit another city's soul. Before we go further, if you want more history told like this, subscribe and tap the bell so the next one finds you. Now back to the story. Act 4. The aftermath, 15-20 Ko. The empire did not survive the week. On the 15th of August, 6 days after Nagasaki, the Emperor of Japan broadcast to his people for the first time in history. The voice of a god, transmitted, recorded, played to a nation that had never heard it, announcing that the war was over. That Japan had accepted the terms of surrender. The broadcast was careful. It did not say the word surrender. It said the war situation had developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. It said the empire would endure. It asked the people to bear the unbearable. But the meaning was unmistakable. The empire had fallen. The war that had begun at Pearl Harbor, that had swept across the Pacific, that had cost millions of lives, was finished. Not by invasion, not by blockade, by the weight of 2 cities and the arrival of 1 million Soviet soldiers in the north. Historians have argued for decades about which of those 2 things ended the war, the bombs or the invasion. The question is still alive, still unsettled, still fought over in every documentary and every doctoral thesis. But the cities themselves were past arguing. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not debating their place in history. They were counting their dead. The dead of Nagasaki kept growing after the surrender. Radiation sickness did not respect the end of the war. Survivors, the hibakusha, would carry the consequences for the rest of their lives. Leukemia, cancers, children born with the scars of a decision made in the air over a city that had never been the first choice. And there was something else the survivors carried, something harder to measure. The people of Nagasaki came to understand that their city had not been chosen, that they had been the second city, the backup, that their destruction had been a consequence of cloud cover over another city, of fuel running low, of a bombardier who found an opening in the sky. They were not the intended victims of the most destructive weapon ever built. They were the ones it fell on when it could not reach its target. That knowledge is a different kind of wound. The bomb scarred the city, the accident of it, the randomness, the being second, scarred the memory of the city for generations. Acet Fi, the forgetting, 21-24-30. And this is where the story takes its strangest turn, because it was not the war that buried Nagasaki, it was the peace. Hiroshima became the symbol. It was the first bomb, and the world needed a first bomb, a single, comprehensible image of what the atom had done. Hiroshima gave the world the atomic bomb dome, the skeletal ruin preserved exactly as it fell, the eternal reminder standing in the middle of a rebuilt city. Nagasaki got the second place. It is not in any sense of the word a forgotten city. Its memorial stands, its survivors speak, its name is known. But it is the sequel, the footnote, the city that history reached for only to answer the question, what else happened? The textbooks say Hiroshima and then add Nagasaki in parentheses as if it were an echo rather than an event of its own. Consider what was different. Hiroshima was a decision, chosen, deliberate, argued, intended. Nagasaki was an accident. Hiroshima was the flat, exposed city. Nagasaki was the hidden valley. Hiroshima was destroyed as it was meant to be. Nagasaki was destroyed by chance, 2 miles from where the bomb was aimed, over a Christian district that had no place on any military list. The second bomb was more powerful than the first. It killed fewer people, not because it was less destructive, but because the hills of Nagasaki held back the blast that the flat ground of Hiroshima had allowed to run. And still, the world remembers the weaker bomb and dims the memory of the stronger one. There is a lesson buried in that forgetting, and it is not comfortable. We remember the events we can frame, the first, the deliberate, the chosen. We struggle to hold the accidents, the randomness, the second place, the cities that were destroyed not because they were meant to be, but because the weather did not cooperate over the city that was. Nagasaki asks a question that Hiroshima does not. Hiroshima asks, what does it mean when a city is chosen for annihilation? Nagasaki asks the harder question, what does it mean when a city is annihilated by chance? When the worst thing that ever happens to you was never even aimed at you, the answer is not a comfort. It is that the machinery of war does not care about intention. It does not check whether you were first choice. It does not consult the list. It delivers its weight to whatever stands beneath the sky when the clouds part. The answer, it turns out, depends entirely on when you started keeping score. And if you started keeping score in a valley called Urakami, you will never stop counting the seconds between the parting of the clouds and the arrival of the light. Hiroshima was chosen, Nagasaki was not. And in that difference lies everything the world has chosen not to remember about the second bomb. The city that was never meant to die carried the larger blast, held it in its valleys, and was written out of history as a parenthetical. It was not a footnote, it was an accident, the most consequential accident ever visited upon a people. And it was allowed to happen because a pilot, running out of fuel, made one turn over a country that had already lost the war it refused to end. Nagasaki is not the sequel to Hiroshima. It is the proof that even in the most deliberate act of destruction ever conceived by human beings, chance still held the pen. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and hit the bell, because the history behind the headlines is only getting deeper. I'm your host. This is Papa Delta Storytelling.